There's a new version of Superman in town, and the good news is that the Zack Snyder directed, Christopher Nolan produced Superman reboot, Man of Steel, is really damn good. It's definitely a new vision, quite the departure from what we've seen in the past Superman movies, but it keeps the things that work, it adds in unique new elements that made the movie a very worthwhile experience. And the thing I really liked about it, and what I've come to like about many of the recent comic book movies, is that there is a strong science fiction element to it. Comic books have always had these really cool ideas, and quite simply, they couldn't be accomplished 20 or 30 years ago because the need for lots of special effects. So right from the get-go with Man of Steel, we know it's going to be something different from the scenes on Krypton. And in a strange way, it does sort of start off like Superman the movie, with Jor-El. This time he's played by Russell Crowe. He's speaking to the elders of Krypton, making pleas with them about the instability of the planet. And then it does this kind of passing of the torch, sort of, where that scene is completely interrupted when General Zod comes into the picture, blasting everything in his way. And then it takes off and it's into its own little, like, kind of action movie with Jor-El kicking ass and flying space dragons, and all that was awesome, and I loved it. And geez, I would normally never say anything like this, but give me a prequel. Give me an entire movie set on Krypton with Russell Crowe as Jor-El. I'd love that. I'd see it. But anyway, obviously the story progresses and mostly takes place on Earth, with Kal-El becoming Clark Kent and Superman, and, well, you know the story. You don't need me to explain it to you. Pretty much everyone knows it by this point, and that's the thing. And kind of the clever aspect of what this movie is, it doesn't bombard us with this whole huge retelling of Superman's origin. It's more like the Cliff Notes of it. They give us little slices and little flashbacks of what's absolutely necessary to tell this particular story, because, really, if they want to do this grand, definitive new vision, the only way to really do it justice would... They'd have to make it like 3.5 hours long, and I don't think that would fly. So it has some compromises to it in order to tell its story, which isn't so much the story of how Superman came to be, but more the story of the conflict that he faces in deciding whether his allegiances lie to his home planet, Krypton, or his adopted planet, Earth. And I thought that was very well done. The father figures are always an important part of these kinds of movies, and here the hero has two. He has his Earth father in Jonathan Kent, and his Krypton father in Jor-El. So he's the son of these two worlds, and in a lot of ways he's just discovering this for the first time. Like, in a very literal way, he comes upon the Kryptonian ship, and his hologram father appears, and in a more symbolic way, as he reflects on his upbringing with Pa Kent, and when he reminisces about all these little speeches and lessons that he gives him in life, and they seem to have a lot more significance to him as an adult at that juncture in his life than they did when he was a kid. So they're both kind of the guardian angels guiding him as he makes his decisions, and as, well, he faces the terrible challenge in the villain Zod. And this version of Zod is great, and played wonderfully by Michael Shannon. The whole plot and the whole evil scheme is pretty interesting. I mean, we've seen a million times before villains trying to destroy the Earth or enslave the Earth, things like that. And with the history and practices of Krypton and what we learn about it, and how people aren't naturally born, but they're conditioned to fulfill a specific purpose in the society, in Zod's case, it's ensuring Krypton's prosperity and defending it. It really makes Zod more of a complex character, and how from his point of view, if he were to wipe life out on Earth, and to terraform, build a new Krypton, that would be fulfilling his purpose. So there's all this stuff about predestiny and making your own choices, and Kal-El, Superman, who lacks the conditioning and was naturally born, having to come to his own decisions, and how far he would have to go to stop Zod. So I liked all that. But my main complaint about the movie in general is that when it comes down to it, this showdown between Superman and Zod, it's a pretty by-the-books brawl, and their banter back and forth is pretty dull and uninspired, pretty much consisting of lines shouting offhand between punches. Zod will say something like, "We can rebuild Krypton, there's a chance," and Superman replying, "Krypton had its chance," and stuff like that. Uh, when the more interesting back and forth is actually between Zod and the hologram of Jor-El, and he even points that out and says, "What am I doing? I'm arguing with a computer program." Then that's a problem, I think. Not to mention when it comes to the actual action, there's not really much to write home about. There's all this destruction and shaky cam. It feels like a Transformers movie, really. And I know some people, for some reason, had criticisms about all the destruction that's caused by their fight, and I kind of sort of see why, but I don't really necessarily have a problem with that kind of stuff. Like, I love the Avengers, and it had all that kind of stuff, but it was done in a style that felt competent, and it allowed for good character moments in between the destruction. And the action here, it's just too erratic. It's really kind of dull, actually. It just kind of goes and goes. And I felt like at the end of it all, I was just watching two blurs go back and forth and slam punches at each other. I did like the little sight gag when they went into the construction site and they knocked down the numbers of a day without accident sign. I'll give it that. That was good. But the action scenes as a whole, they kind of go on too long. They have no real flavor. So that was just disappointing. Like, really, can we stop with the shaky cam? No, it doesn't give it a gritty documentary-like feel. No, it doesn't add anything to it. It's just stupid. Please stop. Filmmakers of the world, stop with the fucking shaky cam. Enough. I've had it. But anyway, aside from all that, there's plenty to like about the movie. The film works in a lot of elements that may work against certain conceptions one may have of the Superman character. For one thing, there's no Clark Kent. Well, there is, but you know what I mean. This isn't a series of events where Clark is in his goofy glasses, and he's hunching over by the water cooler, stammering, trying to make conversation with Lois, and then, of course, danger approaches, as it often does. Clark says, "I gotta go," something like that. Then all of a sudden, Superman shows up to save the day, and no one is any the wiser. And I think it's good that they avoided stuff like that, because if Lois, especially this modern version of Lois in this technological information age, if she really is as smart and resourceful and as good as of a reporter as she supposedly made out to be, then she'd figure it out eventually, and she has in the previous movies. So they sidestep that completely, and in fact work Lois in as an integral part of Superman's origin and self-discovery, albeit in sort of a contrived way. But basically, the interesting thing, and what I liked and thought was a good and nicely calculated move against the expectations, is that at the end of this all, even before Clark shows up at the Daily Planet, thick-rimmed glasses and all, Lois knows his secret, and there's a lot of possibilities to that. I won't hold my breath, though. Some kind of amnesia-inducing kiss may await in the sequel. But, as it stands, I like that element to it. And even though I thought maybe there could have been more to the relationship between Lois and Clark, like maybe they could have taken one or two scenes just to breathe, just to have a nice quiet moment here or there. Henry Cavill's and Amy Adams' chemistry is enough for you to buy the love story, but I felt like I could have used a little bit more. And with a movie like this, it's 2.5 hours, but it doesn't slow down one bit. I think that they're still able to get that across. It does say a lot. On the whole, I really liked the movie. I liked the characters. I thought the plot was interesting, and it served the Superman story justice by giving us a story that we already knew, but presented it in a different way. And they added some new stuff that went against the expectations, but nothing so extreme as to come off self-congratulatory or disrespectful to the fans of the comic, Iron Man 3. The action, it could have used a little more flair and personality. In fact, the characters themselves, they could have used a little more flair and personality. But in an age where we have limitless special effects, we can tell any kind of story, they have set out a line in this series here, and they pretty much can map out an entire series before it's even begun. So I know we're going to get a little bit more time to get to know the characters better. And with all those special effects, I know we're in for some cooler stuff than just rich billionaires. So we can have stuff like Metallo, Brainiac, Doomsday. Those are all real possibilities. And that's something really exciting to think about. But We've entered a brave new world of Superman movies, and I can't wait to see what's next.